I never imagined my sister's wedding would be the day everything unraveled. Looking back, I should have known something was off when my invitation arrived just 3 days before the ceremony. Kitchen staff entrance only, it read in elegant gold script, with a hastily drawn arrow pointing toward the back of the venue. Typical Victoria. She had always been the golden child, polished, poised, perfect. While I dedicated my life to teaching underprivileged children, she climbed the corporate ladder in designer heels, collecting promotions like trophies. Our parents never let me forget the difference. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Mom would sigh, eyeing my thrift store clothes and sensible shoes. "She's engaged to James Anderson, CEO of Anderson Industries. And you, what do you have?" What they never understood was that I had plenty. My modest apartment might not impress them, but the spark in a student's eyes when they finally understood a lesson? That was priceless. Still, I went to the wedding, because despite everything, Victoria was my sister. I slipped into my best dress, simple, but elegant, and drove my aging Honda Civic to the Grand Plaza Hotel. At the entrance, the security guard barely glanced at my invitation before jerking his thumb toward the back. "Service entrance," he said flatly. I swallowed the lump in my throat and obeyed. The kitchen buzzed with chefs and waitstaff, too busy to notice me weaving through trays of hors d'oeuvres. A hostess led me past the lavishly decorated ballroom to a dimly lit corner behind a massive pillar, practically hidden from view. Victoria's instructions were very specific. She murmured, almost apologetic. Family members who might detract from the event should remain out of sight. My stomach twisted. The table was set with plastic cutlery. Across the room, crystal glasses sparkled beneath the chandeliers. Beside my disposable fork lay a small, handwritten note in my sister's familiar script. "Know your place, little sister. Don't ruin this for me." I should have left, walked out and never looked back. But something kept me rooted to my seat, perhaps the same defiance that made me choose passion over prestige. The ceremony was, of course, breathtaking. Victoria glided down the aisle in a gown that probably cost more than my annual salary, beaming at the man waiting for her at the altar. James Anderson. Tall, handsome, polished in the way of men who graced magazine covers, but as the vows neared, his expression tightened, his fingers twitched at his side. And then he saw me. Across the room, his eyes locked onto mine. The blood drained from his face. The next second, his wedding ring slipped from his fingers. The small golden band hit the marble floor with a sharp ping, rolling, until it stopped right at my feet. I bent to pick it up, but as my fingers closed around the cool metal, a rush of memories flooded back. 15 years ago. I was 19, working my way through college in a tiny Boston cafe. He was 22, a graduate student with big dreams of ethical business reform. Back then, he wasn't James Anderson, CEO. He was just Jamie. 6 months of stolen kisses, late-night conversations, whispered dreams of a future where we'd change the world together, him in business, me in education. Then, one day, he was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just vanished. I searched for him, but it was like he had never existed. A year later, his face appeared in a business magazine. James Anderson, heir to Anderson Industries, engaged to a wealthy socialite. Now, here he was. Frozen. Staring at me like he had seen a ghost. Victoria's perfectly arched brows furrowed. "James, darling, do you know my pathetic little sister?" But James wasn't looking at her anymore. His gaze had dropped to my left hand. Where, even after all these years, I still wore the delicate silver ring he had once slipped onto my finger in that tiny Boston cafe. The one with the inscription inside, "To my Emma." Who taught me what really matters? Emma. James breathed. In that single word, I heard 15 years of regret. Victoria's voice turned sharp. "James, what's going on?" Before he could answer, a distinguished older man rose from the front row, Richard Anderson Sr., founder of Anderson Industries. His face was thunderous as he strode toward the altar. "Son," his voice sliced through the stunned silence, "tell me this isn't the same Emma." "The same Emma?" The words hovered like storm clouds. "The same Emma?" James squared his shoulders, and for a fleeting moment, I saw him, not the polished CEO, but the Jamie I once knew, The man who wanted to change the world. Yes, father, he said, his voice clear and unwavering. This is Emma Chin, the woman you paid $5 million to disappear 15 years ago. The room exploded into chaos. Guests gasped. Phones appeared, cameras recording the unraveling spectacle. Victoria's dream wedding was dissolving before her eyes. Her face had turned an alarming shade of red that clashed horribly with her pristine white gown. $5 million. I rose to my feet, my teacher's salary suddenly feeling like a cruel joke. You paid me to disappear? My voice was quiet, but it carried. Richard Anderson Sr. straightened his expensive tie. I paid your mother, he corrected coldly. She assured me you'd never contact James again. She said you agreed it was for the best. My mother. Of course. The sudden insistence that I transfer universities, the mysterious deposit in my college fund, the relentless reminders that James, was out of my league. I turned to her. You knew. She shrank into her seat. You took money to separate us? My voice cracked. It was for your own good, she said stiffly, rising to her feet. Her designer dress rustled as she spoke. Look at you, a teacher, living in a tiny apartment. James needed someone who could understand his world. Victoria was perfect for him. Victoria seized the moment, her voice laced with scorn. James, darling, surely you're not comparing my worthless sister to me? I mean, just look at her dress. It's not even designer. James turned to me, his expression unreadable. Then, softly. No, it's handmade. I blinked. Emma always said the most valuable things are made with love, not money. His eyes searched mine. You still make your own clothes? I nodded, my throat tight. He remembered. This is ridiculous, Richard Sr. thundered. Some of us have responsibilities. The merger with Victoria's father. James's voice turned to ice. Is that what this wedding is really about, father? A business deal? Victoria paled. What do you mean, a business deal? James turned to her. Your father's company is failing. This marriage would save it. That's why he pushed so hard for you to date me, isn't it? Victoria's father shot up from his seat. Now, see here. But James wasn't finished. He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a USB drive. I found some interesting documents last week, father, about what really happened 15 years ago, about the real reason you wanted Emma gone. Richard Sr. went deathly pale. James ignored him, his eyes locked on me. Emma wasn't just my girlfriend back then, he said, his voice cutting through the hush. I held my breath. Because I already knew what he was about to say. She was also volunteering at a youth center in South Boston. James continued, a youth center that was about to be demolished for one of our developments. A development that would have displaced hundreds of families. The memory hit me like a freight train. The protests, the late-night strategy meetings, the growing media attention, and James, standing by my side, promising we'd find another way. Emma was organizing the community, James went on, his voice steady, and she was good at it. Too good. If that project had failed, it wouldn't have just cost the company millions, it would have proven that Anderson Industries could be beaten. That's why she had to go, isn't it, father? Richard Anderson Sr. sank into his chair, his face ashen. So you paid her mother to make her disappear, James said coldly. You erased every trace of our relationship. You even donated to her new university to ensure her transfer went through. Let me guess, also perfectly arranged? I did what was necessary for the company, his father muttered. James let out a short, humorless laugh. The company? You mean the company that's now mine? A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. Oh yes, he continued, turning to the stunned guests. As of last week, I became the majority shareholder. Father signed over control as an early wedding gift. Ironic, isn't it? He walked toward me, completely ignoring Victoria's indignant squeak. Emma, he said softly, I spent 15 years thinking you abandoned me, 15 years trying to be the son my father wanted. Then I found these documents, and everything made sense. I was going to stop the wedding, but when I saw your name on the guest list, seated in the kitchen, I added dryly. His lips twitched into a grin. Victoria always did have a flair for drama. He turned to my sister. By the way, the wedding's off, And you might want to check your father's company's financials before he tries to set up another merger. Victoria let out an unholy shriek and hurled her bouquet at us. It missed, instead striking a towering champagne display. Glass shattered, guests gasped, someone screamed. James barely blinked. As my first act as CEO, he announced over the chaos, Anderson Industries will establish a $100 million foundation for education and community initiatives. Then, he turned to me. We need a director, someone who understands both education and grassroots organizing. Interested? From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother shoot to her feet. Emma, darling, I always knew you had potential. Save it. My voice was calm but firm. You've done enough helping for one lifetime. Then, back to James. This foundation job, I mused, does it come with a corner office? He grinned. Only if you agree to dinner first. I know this little coffee shop in Boston. You can't do this. Victoria shrieked. Daddy, do something. But her father was already storming out, phone pressed to his ear, probably dialing his accountant. Richard Anderson Sr. rose shakily. Son, think about what you're doing. Oh, I have, father, for 15 years. James took my hand. This company needs a new legacy, less corporate greed, more social responsibility. Emma always said the measure of success isn't how much money you make, it's how many lives you improve. Victoria launched into another fit, but I barely heard her. I was staring at the small silver ring I'd never taken off, remembering a boy in a coffee shop who once wanted to change the world. James reached out, brushing his thumb over it. You kept it, he murmured. I met his gaze. You came back. 6 months later, the Anderson Chin Foundation had already funded 50 community programs. Victoria married a minor European prince who, ironically, believed in socialist policies. My parents suddenly became very invested in charitable giving though, somehow, their invitations to family events kept getting lost in the mail. Richard Anderson Sr. retired to a villa in Italy, though he did send a surprisingly heartfelt letter of apology. I framed it next to the newspaper article about our foundation's launch. As for James and me, we still go to that little coffee shop in Boston. He still orders black coffee, no sugar, but now, when we talk about changing the world, we actually do it. And the small silver ring? It finally has a companion, a simple gold band that matches it perfectly. The inscription? To my James, who found his way home. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting it right.